Am I an empath? What is an empath? You want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think I hear that a lot, first of all, but the way I hear it is like, am I supposed to be empathetic towards this? Like, what does that even mean in relationships, right? Like, what the difference is between empathy and sympathy, right? I think that's the way it shows up for me.
I gotcha. In terms of those two specifically.
Yeah.
I think some of the main points of being empathetic is truly being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Absolutely.
Being able to feel what somebody else is feeling, not just being able to imagine. And if we want to kind of jump into the comparison between empathy and sympathy, empathy is truly being able to feel what somebody is feeling versus sympathy is being able to see what they're feeling and being able to acknowledge that something that they're feeling is hard.
Right, exactly. Like empathy is feeling with somebody and sympathy is feeling for somebody. Does that make sense?
It does. When I think of sympathy, automatically I think of, grief or being at a funeral, being able to say like, wow, this is a situation that I wouldn't want to go through. This is really difficult. That to me automatically means, okay, you probably have never lost somebody that is that close, right? Because you see that they're in pain, but you may have never experienced it. It doesn't change that you can't.
Sympathy?
That's sympathy. You see something that somebody is experiencing, you acknowledge that it may be difficult or hard, but you yourself do not have a stored memory of the same experience, or you may have not experienced something to that degree. So you could see it, you can acknowledge it, but you have never felt it. So therefore you are not empathizing, because empathizing is being able to feel what someone is feeling, not just being able to see it and acknowledge it.
So in that scenario, sympathy would be, I'm sorry you're going through that.
Yes, exactly.
What would empathy be?
Oh my God, I've experienced that too. I feel what you're feeling.
Yeah, it's being able to sort of identify like, this is so hard, right?
Absolutely. And I think right now it's very popular to say, well, I'm an empath. Okay, fine. You feel feelings deeply is what I hear, right? I think it's kind of being thrown around. I mean,
yeah,
like the word trigger, is just everybody knows what it means, and now everybody's just using it and misusing it in some cases. So I think it's important to really understand what is empathy and what is being an empath, and how does that affect your day-to-day life, right?
So yeah, what I think of when I think of that is like that emotional toll when you truly are an empath. That emotional toll that you feel can be very difficult and very heavy.
And there's phrases that I often hear from, clients and people in general that I talk to that use that phrase is, I absorb the energy in the room.
Yep.
Right. And it's very draining because I can feel what everybody is feeling. That is quite overwhelming for sure.
Right. And maybe not even in just the room that you're in, but in the world, in your environment, right? Like all of the, maybe like you're watching the news and you see all of these terrible things and you absorb that and you feel that, and it affects you in such a detrimental way that sometimes it's really hard to get out of that.
Or to be able to figure out a way to disconnect from feeling everything, right? Because it's one thing to be empathetic, to be able to say like, wow, I recognize that feeling. I know what that feels like. Ouch, or, I mean, you could also be an empath for happy feelings, but
yeah,
I think for this point that we're trying to make here, focusing on the negative, scary feelings, right? Because they're the ones that take a toll on you.
Yeah,
is to be able to truly to be able to figure out how to disconnect from empathizing with everything, right? Because what is the purpose of empathy? The purpose of empathy is to create a connection with another person, right? So if you're not trying to create a connection with another purpose, it is not appropriate to empathize with whatever that is, right? A connection with your environment, a connection with your present, whatever. If there is a lack of developing a connection, there's no place for empathy, because ultimately it will drain you. And that's where empaths tend to isolate, tend to withdraw, because they connect to so many different things that there's nothing that sort of makes it valuable. If you empathize with somebody, and let's, take the funeral as, as the option or example from earlier, is let's say they've lost a parent and you have also lost a parent. Then you can say, oh my God, this is so hard. I've also been through it. I'm so sorry. This sucks so much for you. Like,
I'm here
I
for
feel
you.
you. Yeah. I feel you. I feel it. That creates, it doesn't empty you.
Right.
In turn, that creates this bond with that person, because they point to you. I mean, hypothetically, right? They point to you and they go, that person gets it. I'm not alone.
Right. Yes.
So that doesn't empty you. That doesn't take your energy. That creates a bond, a connection, a real, truly valuable and meaningful relationship through a shared experience. But if you're empathizing with somebody who doesn't even know that you're just like, oh, that sucks, some random far off person, you're not developing a bond. You're not creating a relationship. You are emptying your feeling. You're depleting versus you are exposing your feelings and creating that bond, because now every time you look at that person that you have created that empathetic relationship with, you're going to be able, there's a connection, right? And that is so worth it. Versus when you are empathetic towards things that do not have that that bond, that relationship, that connection.
Yeah. So there's that distinction.
Absolutely.
Is being able to identify what are the important things to be empathetic about or be empathetic
Not everything deserves your empathy, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can be a highly empathetic person. I would like to think that I am an empathetic person. I mean, being a therapist, that's kind of a requirement.
Absolutely.
But you can't be empathetic towards everything, because what is the purpose of that except for fatigue and inability to then self-care because you're so empty, right?
So is that, maybe in my mind, is that like the difference then? Like, which one do you choose, empathy or sympathy in certain situations? Right? Like maybe sympathy could be like, yeah, that sucks. That's terrible. Like I'm sorry you're going through that, or I'm sorry this is happening in the world, but maybe not really crossing the line every time to empathy.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great way to be able to decipher, like, are you just acknowledging something and going, ouch, versus truly feeling it, right?
Yeah. Because I think it's, I feel like if you don't express, let's say, how you feel about a certain situation, let's say you observe something and it's terrible and you're just like, whatever, I'm not going to feel it. That can create that sort of like complete disconnect and aversion to those types of things. But maybe if you say, yeah, that sucks, that's terrible, like, I wish it was different, you're still acknowledging the fact that you feel something, but you're not going to cross that sort of bridge to empathy and maybe depleting yourself.
Right, exactly. Because I think that's the biggest gripe with being an empathetic person, is you really feel very depressed and low and empty because you feel so much all the time. And it's not the happy feelings that deplete you. It's generally feeling something for somebody else, feeling something so deeply for somebody else's experience when there is no need for that. You're overextending yourself. You're really putting yourself through a cycle of feelings that, one, are perhaps are not your own or were yours, but at a really previous point in time. So you're sort of reliving your own pain without any type of, I don't want to say like, without any type of benefit, right? It's like if you've experienced something and that hurt and you've processed it and you've done all the work and you've sort of overcome that, and there isn't a need for you to share that experience, then you are truly re-traumatizing yourself. You are really making yourself go through that pain over and over again, which is not healthy, and that's not helpful. The whole point of empathy is to develop strength, connections, right? Community, all those different things. Finding people who have shared experiences and uniting and creating that as a source of strength and power. If that is not part of that, you need to really reevaluate, is my empathy necessary in this moment, or do I need to learn how to create boundaries, protect myself, perhaps not apply my own experiences to everything across the board?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people who identify as empaths, unfortunately, are part of the cycle of isolation and depression and anxiety. And that could be very lonely. So
Definitely.
understanding that definition of what it actually is may start the beginning of change.
Because you can be kind, but also strong and reserved, right? You can't be available to everything and everyone because that just leaves you open to also getting hurt, getting used. That's the other part, right? Is being empath means that people may take advantage of that. They may take advantage of eliciting your feelings to their own benefit because they know, hey, if I say I've been through this and you also been through this, you're going to be more inclined to doing things for me because I'm making this sort of fake connection with you as a result that I know how strongly you feel feelings.
That's a really good point. And maybe being an empath in that sort of negative way, like the depletion of yourself or just like being able to overextending can make you a target for people that have narcissism, that are narcissists, right? Because you're going to kind of play into that cycle of serving a purpose for them.
Right.
And
also, you know that feeling bad sucks, and you can feel that, right? So if they're using them feeling bad as a way to control you, you're going to be like, oh, but I don't want them to feel bad because I know how bad that feels.
Yes.
So if I can make them feel better, I'll feel better.
Right.
And then
don't.
Right. And then you're trapped in this, like, it doesn't matter what I feel, but as long as they feel better, I'll feel better because my empathy isn't just based on connection. My empathy is, if you're feeling bad, I also can channel areas in my experiences that I felt bad. So if you feel bad, I feel bad. And now we're both feeling bad. So until I make you feel better, I can't feel better. So now you have this codependent type of relationship. And if the person that you're with does not have good intentions for you, they will take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy for somebody who is empathetic in that way to fall victim to that cycle. Because that's all you want to do, is you want to help somebody not feel the way that you know sucks.
Absolutely.
That doesn't feel good. Right.
And the other commonality is, I hear this often, is I'm the therapist in the friend group. And that's usually the person who truly feels and understands, which is why people come to them and abuse them, right? And not like physically, and not intentionally sometimes either, but they'll come to you with the same problem over and over and over and over and over again. And they keep telling you about it because you'll sit there and you'll listen and you'll try to relate to them and you'll support them and then ultimately make them feel better. But they don't take advice after that. They go back and have the same situation over and over and over. And they come back to you over and over and over. And then you're like, dude, I can't keep sitting in this mess with you. You don't want to get out. You don't want to change anything. You keep coming to me and I keep saying yes. But after a while, you start feeling helpless.
Yeah.
And then not only are you feeling what they're feeling, but you can't do anything about it, which makes you feel helpless as an empath. You want to be helpful.
Yes.
So now you're taking double damage.
Yeah. Being in that position in the friend group is hard work. But, part of that is like, okay, if this cycle just keeps repeating itself, as the person's coming to you with the same problems, you keep telling them the same things, it's like this repetitive behavior. At one point or another, the healthy thing to do would be like, all right, I got to set a boundary here.
Yes.
Boundaries, right?
Yes. As an empath, your number one priority is to learn how to set boundaries, or you will always end up in a situation of depletion, burnout, depression, and anxiety.
Exactly. So being able to identify those boundaries and sticking to them while also being compassionate and still somewhat empathetic. We're not saying don't be an empath, but do it in the way that it's supposed to be, sort of based on the definition, based on creating that connection with somebody, based on creating a healthy relationship, right? That bond, versus always just giving, and
then feeling helpless or whatever. Yeah. And I think it's also important to realize that if there is no self-care as an empath, that's not good. and it's not easy to do any self-care stuff or any type of your like personal work because you're so quick to helping everybody else and prioritizing everyone else before yourself.
Yes.
So if you know you're an empath, then you need to know you probably do not do very well at self-care. You probably overextend yourself.
Right.
You're probably burnt out all the time and you don't have good boundaries. Now you know. What are you going to do about it?
Recipe for disaster,
right?
In my mind.
You know, so it's amazing. Truly, people who are empathetic are angels, you know, truly here to help and love and care and want to. However, there are flaws with being an empath, and most of those are because you do not take care of yourself and you do not know how to set boundaries, and those are your life lessons.
Right.
Figure out how to do that, because that will allow you to be your beautiful empath self, but also not destroy you in the process. Because if you self-destruct, you're not going to be an empath or helpful to anybody.
Absolutely not, because you're not going to have anything within you to do that. Nothing is left. You're just a shell that's like giving to other people all the time. And it's so easy to, again, get into that cycle of like, I need to help other people. I need to help whatever.
They're going through so much. They're going through. Okay, cool. What are you doing?
What about you though? What are you going through?
Right.
And who's sort of worried about you in that sense?
Because if you're the caretaker of, let's say, for the same example, your friend group, then you're going to experience something called caregiver fatigue, which means you're running around helping and taking care of everybody else, but nobody's really doing that in return because nobody's noticing that you need any help because you don't say anything to anybody.
Nobody's doing it and you're not doing it. Facts. And so it's not happening at all.
Right, exactly. So what are some of the boundaries that you set as an empath to protect yourself and your energy so that you're still able to do what you got to do? You're still able to make those connections, but you don't deplete yourself to the point where you're depressed and anxious all the time.
First thing that comes to mind for me is being able to identify when to say no. Like, you are allowed to say no.
Absolutely.
You're not going to always say no, because you also, you are that person. You naturally, right? You want to be able to help. You want to be supportive and things like that. But you need to be able to say, all right, I've reached my limit, or I don't feel good, or I'm not having a good day. So I need to say no right now.
And what does that mean if you say no? What does that mean?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I think about, like, at least through the conversations I've had with people who identify as empaths, it's saying no is almost impossible. It's like crippling.
It's hard. Yeah, because it's kind of sets the tone of like, well, am I not going to be that person that can support them? It's that fear of not really being your genuine self, I feel like.
What happens if you say no? What happens if you say no?
I don't think anything's really going to happen.
Right, but in your mind, it's, I'm letting them down and they need me.
Yes, exactly. And you don't want to be, your most natural sort of go-to is not that. You want to be that person that they go to.
Caring, loving, supportive, there for them no matter what.
Yeah.
But also you're setting an example that you don't know how to take care of yourself. You are not a priority. You are not, I think about this often as like, if you have children and they're watching you do this day in and day out, and you're just depleted and you come home and there's no energy and you're always depressed for your own things, they're watching that, right? They're seeing that and they're going like, whoa, is this the way I'm supposed to behave? Just run myself ragged for everybody else? Yep. The answer is no. You need to learn how to be caring about yourself, especially when you're somebody who is so caring about everybody else. What does that look like? Are you literally basic stuff? Are you sleeping? Are you allowing space to sleep? Are you taking care of your own problems? Are you eating? Are you making sure that you handled your own responsibilities first before you take care of everybody else, right? It's that like airplane mask type of situation.
I use this all the time. When the mask comes down, you put on yours first.
Because if you're running around helping everybody else, you'll pass out. And then what good are you? You're dead and you didn't help everybody else out.
Right, exactly. So being able to take care of yourself is very, very important.
Which feels unnatural in the beginning, but you have to overcome that feeling because ultimately it is what's best for you and for the people that you spend time caring about.
And I think just to clarify, like saying no could be a part of self-care, but you have to also be able to say no with some compassion. Like, no, I can't really do that right now, but you know what? I'll be able to show up for you at another time. Like this doesn't mean that no is just no forever.
Because I hate you.
Right. That's not what you're saying. You're just setting that boundary. Like right this second, I'm not able to show up for you, but let's talk about this in a couple of days and make a plan or something. Like I'll still be able to support you in some kind of way, but it can't just be in this way right now.
And I think it's also, it's kind of like this back and forth. Like you have to realize being an empath is amazing and special, but also it comes with a lot of burden that you have to attend to. You have to recognize that although you are an empath, that could be detrimental to your health as a result, which
Absolutely.
It's a great skill. It's a wonderful characteristic. It's like, whoa, it's awesome. However, with that, if you identify as that means that needs to be like a flashing red light that says, oh my God, that means that I have to also attend to all these things, because otherwise my life will be very difficult and very painful. And there's going to be a lot of struggle and a mental illness as a result.
Yeah. Like sort of what is the bare minimum of self-care that I need to do to be myself, but also not like die.
Right.
Like
non-negotiable.
Right. Like going back to the basics. If you're not eating, what's going to happen to your body? If you're not sleeping, what's going to happen to your body? Right? Like those are not going to be things that are good for you. You're not putting the good nutrition into your body. You're not going to have the energy. You might develop some illnesses, that are related to that. Like there's so many consequences, right?
If you want to be a good empath, you better take care of yourself first.
Absolutely.
Because there's good and bad empaths. I think one is you just let people use and abuse you in a way that is unacceptable because you end up suffering as a consequence, versus you have developed a system, whether you like it or not, you have developed a system that works to where you can then be your true self, but the healthiest version of your true self.
Yeah. You don't need to stop being empathetic. You just need to do it in a healthy way that is good for you first and foremost. And then you'll be able to be an empath in whatever capacity that looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes all that takes is for you to be able to create space for yourself. Maybe it's just spending time on your own, maybe picking a couple of days a week where you're not available to people, to friends, to loved ones, whatever. But you spend time doing activities that fill your cup, right? Things that you love, hiking, painting, drawing, watching TV, whatever that is. But you make that kind of a non-negotiable where you might want to, your instinct may force you to want to run and do all these things. But if you do, there will be consequences. So you're kind of not allowed to forego self-care.
Exactly. And that's going back to that idea of like saying no. If somebody comes to you during the day, let's say you're going to be painting, right? And they're like, hey, like I really need your help with this and that. But you have to be able to evaluate, like, first of all, is this an emergency?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, for emergencies, obviously.
Right. Okay.
But not everything's an emergency.
Right. And you have to be able to identify that. And if it's not, then that's when you say, listen, like today's my day, I can help you tomorrow. I can help you the next day, whatever. But it's not, it's going to have to be
a different day.
Absolutely.
And also realizing just because somebody comes to you does not mean that there aren't other people that are also available, right? I feel like a lot of the time being an empath, talking to empaths where it's like if somebody comes to you, that inevitably becomes the number one priority. Somebody is in trouble. I have to help them because they're in trouble, right? But it's like, cool. But there's like 3 other people that can help them. It's not just you. It's
and why is it always you? Because probably
you're available.
Exactly.
Even though you're not available, you make yourself available and they know they can count on you, which is fine. That's great.
Yeah.
But when it's to this extreme, you are neglecting yourself.
Absolutely. That's the part to pay attention to. Am I neglecting myself to be able to help other people? And if the answer is yes, time for change.
100%.